Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Samuels, do you remember being asked a question with regard to comparing the PTSD that Jodi suffers to PTSD that can happen with trained soldiers and police officers?
Yes.
And what comparison are you making between the two?
The comparison is that both groups reach the same diagnostic criteria, albeit for very different reasons.
All right. And when somebody experiences a trauma, do they necessarily get PTSD?
No.
What about if the person is trained, the more trained they are to deal with certain traumas?
While they're still vulnerable, there's a decreasing probability of undergoing an acute stress reaction if they are well trained and prepared.
Okay. And if the person, I guess along those lines, if a person has control over the situation where they know what's going to happen, is there a less probability or less likely for that person to then be thrown into an acute stress?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, normally what occurs is that there's a shock value to certain situations. The person feels threatened first, and then they go after. They may respond by either fleeing or protecting themselves. But if they're planning to kill someone, then the initial reaction is theirs. They don't have the element of surprise. There's more planning involved. And while it may very well be that their reaction to what they just did would be very negative, the likelihood of developing a acute stress reaction and experiencing those severe autonomic changes is lower.
Okay. You talked about when you first, there was a question about when you first learned of Jodi having a physiological response. We're talking about the tremors and the shaking. When you first learned about the fact that she was having tremors or that she was shaking, was it Mr. Nurmi who told you?
Yes.
And after that, did you know to look for it?
That's right. After that point, I made an effort to look at it and see it myself.
And after that, did you discuss it with Jodi after that?
After that, yes.
Is it something that Jodi brought up to you all on your own to show a symptom that she had?
No. I inquired when I first found out about that, and then she told me that she had sweaty palms and also shaking under various different conditions.
Okay. So it's something that she answered your questions after you found out about it?
That's right. I wanted to inquire further because I hadn't noticed it.
Okay. And let's see, with regard to the question about, there must have been some confusion with regard to the 3 to 8 cases per 100,000 people of transient global amnesia.
Yes.
Okay. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. Isn't that a small number, 3 to 8
A very
people?
small number, yes.
All right, so what is the point then?
The point was simply to explain to the jury and to show that amnesia is not something that's mysterious, that it can occur under a wide range of circumstances. I indicated that it didn't happen very frequently, but I simply wanted to lay that as a foundation for the further discussion of dissociative amnesia.
Okay. And this particular, where you got that number from, the 3 to 8 out of 100,000, was that contained in a review article?
Yes.
And did that review article contain information from 119 other articles?
Yes.
And that was speaking of generally a type of amnesia, transient global amnesia, is that right?
Correct.
And that type of amnesia, you said, can occur from far less traumatic things?
Yes.
Whereas dissociative amnesia, that occurs from something much more traumatic?
Correct.
You were asked questions about hypnosis?
Yes.
Is hypnosis something that an evaluator typically does?
No, not unless requested. For example, when I consulted with the police departments of the state police in New Jersey, I was infrequently asked to do a hypnotic analysis.
I'm sorry, did you say infrequently?
Infrequently asked,
okay.
Yes. It didn't happen very often. And when I was asked to do it, I did because I am proficient in hypnosis. And it was helpful a few times to help certain police officers better recollect the circumstances of the situation in which they were involved with the shooting incident. But it didn't really help the investigation all that much, and it was never clear whether they were just confabulating that or making it up based upon things that were said or things that they heard about. I did use hypnosis in the case of a young, maybe a 10-year-old girl who was accused of killing her mother, and to try to get some information from her. And in that case, it was more useful.
Okay. Is hypnosis something that would be done more in therapy?
Yes.
And so is that why you're not frequently asked to do it as an evaluator?
Well, its value is limited, and the information that you get from hypnosis is generally not considered reliable, and it is subject to cross-examination, and it doesn't stand up. It's a pretty good therapeutic tool, by the way. Hypnosis can be very effective in controlling anxiety, depression, habit control, and so on. But as a forensic technique, it has its limits.
All right. And were you doing any kind of therapy with Jodi?
None whatsoever.
You were asked a question about whether other doctors do you know if other doctors would have a different opinion with regard to your diagnosis of PTSD for Jodi? Do you remember that question?
Yes, I do remember that question.
All right. And other doctors with your experience level, do you have an idea of whether or not they would be have differing opinions from your diagnosis?
Approach.
Doctor, when other doctors are looking at making a diagnosis, and psychologists in particular, are they all using, to make a diagnosis, are they all using the same criteria that you would use?
Yes.
And is that criteria located in the DSM?
Yes.
And so if you find that the criteria exists pursuant to the DSM, is there a likelihood of doctors with the same experience level who are listening to the same things that you're listening to, is there a likelihood that they would find the same criteria?
If they had the opportunity to review all of the material and to interview the client in a similar manner, yes, I would have a great deal of confidence that they would find the same diagnosis as me.
Okay. During one of the questions you asked about, you talked about an assessment. How can you make an assessment if the person is lying?
I recall.
And you talked about that you've been doing these evaluations and therapy, things like that, for for 35 years, and some of the things that you look at in order to make these assessments.
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the things that you look at to make these assessments?
Well, you look at the consistency of the reporting. You look at the ancillary information, whatever that may be. In some cases, it might be a spouse or other family members. It might be a diary. It might be text messages or emails. Comments with significant people, discussions with significant people in their lives. And you try to form a pattern. And if the things that you're being told are consistent with that which was told to you by others, then you have to attribute a higher level of likelihood that what they are telling with you is true.
Okay. One of the questions that you were asked dealt with how do you know, based on, we're talking about Jodi's journals, how do you know that nothing negative, and we saw some of the negative writings, but nothing overly negative, how do you know that nothing overly negative was written in her journals isn't because nothing negative ever happened? Do you remember that question?
I do.
And did you review text messages and emails besides speaking to Jodi? Did you look at other things? Did you look at other things other than speaking with Jodi to learn about some negative experiences?
I did.
And in doing that, did you run across text messages between Jodi and Travis?
I did.
And in these text messages, did you see certain ways that Travis would treat Jodi?
Yes.
And I'm showing you exhibit number 444. This is a text message that we've already established previously, that this is a text message coming from Travis to Jodi.
Yes.
And do you see where he's talking to her about do not call me, do not text me anything?
Yes.
Oops, hold on.
Right up on top.
Yeah. And that anything else matters about all the crazy things you've done, so either fess up or feel my wrath, or feel the wrath. You see that?
Is that the middle of the page there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There it is, down there. Okay, yes, I see it.
And that no matter how bad the truth is, I promise you the punishment will be better than the lie.
Yes.
Is this type of behavior threatening behavior?
You could.
Can it be considered threatening behavior by somebody who is receiving it?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as Exhibit 445. Do you see the incoming where it says, it doesn't sound to me It doesn't sound to me like to me, that's being dramatic, dear. Call me ASAP. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then the outgoing message, which means it's coming from Travis to Jodi. Do not call back. I'm sick of you playing stupid and dealing with childish tactics. You see that?
Yes.
And then he goes on, in the next part of the long text message, he talks about how she's ruining yet another day of his. Do you see that in the beginning?
I do.
And do you see where he talks about bitter feelings are brewing in me towards you?
Yes.
Do you see that? And he's sick of having days ruined by her.
Yes.
And that he's going to have a genuine dislike for her.
Yes.
And do you see where he starts talking about revenge?
Yes.
Are these things that, being received by someone else, can these be considered negative or mean?
Yes.
Are these types of comments hurtful? Can they be considered hurtful?
Sure.
I'm showing you it's been entered as exhibit number 450. This is another of a text fight. And I'm looking specifically in the middle, where he talks about, by the way, your pick comment to Danny Jones makes you look like a pure whore. You see that?
I do.
Is that something that is a pleasantry that people exchange between each other?
No.
And if he knew what I knew about you, he'd spit in your face. That's not a pleasantry, is it?
Not loving words, no.
And to call somebody evil.
It's a very negative assessment.
And are you aware from reading other instant chat mail and emails and things like that of the different names that Jodi was called by Travis? Names like slut.
Yes.
Whore.
Yes.
Bitch.
Yes.
Three-hole wonder.
Yes.
Those kind of names and this type of behavior. Did you ever see any writing like this in her journals?
Absolutely nothing like it whatsoever.
And so when you are talking about her not writing negative experiences in her journals, are these some of the things that you are talking about?
She was always writing her journal to make Travis look good.
Did she ever talk to you about why she did that?
Well, yes, she did.
Why is that?
Well, she respected him. She loved him. She hoped that she could be part of his life. And she was hopeful that he would eventually change.
And is that something she talked about, that his hope for change?
Yes, that was part of her conversation.
And somebody who has a loved one speak to them in this way, and then doesn't do anything, stays in the relationship until the next time they're spoken to in this manner, does that speak to their assertiveness and their self-esteem?
Absolutely.
What does it say about it?
It says that they have low self-esteem and that they're not assertive. Not assertive at all.
You remember you were asked some questions about the testing, questions 16 through 21.
Yes.
All right. Oh, I'm showing you exhibit 540.
Yes.
Which shows questions 16 through 21, and the exhibit 540 is these are the questions on the PDS test.
Yes.
And these questions 16 through 21, they speak to a trauma. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you had talked earlier about when a person is speaking of a trauma, does it necessarily matter the specifics of the trauma?
Not if you're talking about one type of trauma over another. In my professional opinion, they were close enough. And so what she was reporting when she took this test was likely that which she experienced during the trauma, even though she attributed the cause of the trauma to something else.
So even though she was talking at the time that she takes this test about intruders still, when she answers the questions 16 through 21, based on what you know, what she says actually happened, did you feel comfortable of whether or not these answers would change?
Objection. Speculation. Overruled.
Yes, I was pretty confident that they would remain roughly the same.
All right. And then ultimately, if they remained roughly the same, did the testing result, which confirmed your hypothesis for PTSD, does that remain the same as well?
That's right, yes.
All right. Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Martinez.
Sir, one of the things that you told us with regard to the PTSD was that the other time was that, well, yes, I would have administered it had I thought about it, right? That's what you told us, right?
I did say that.
And, sir, with regard to that, you also said that you provided us with some raw data, right? Remember questions being asked about the raw data in that particular test?
That particular test?
The PDS test?
Overruled.
Do you remember that?
I did not supply the defense team with the raw data.
No, I'm not asking about that. Do you remember that you made a comment about lawyers coming in possession of raw data? Do you remember that during the question from the jury?
Well, we discussed it, yes.
Yes or no?
Yes, we discussed it.
And with regard to that, you said it's because they wouldn't understand it, right? You said that, right?
Well, that's one component.
Sure, but you said it here in court, right?
I don't recall specifically.
Objection, Judge. Beyond the scope. May we approach?
You may approach. You may continue.
There is raw data that's associated with the PDS test, correct?
Yes.
Let's take a look at that raw data. So this is Exhibit 550. Take a look at it and see if you recognize that as the raw data involving the PDS test that you said did not need to be readministered today.
Yes, that's it.
And this one actually contains the little circles filled in, right?
Yep.
Move for the admission of Exhibit 550.
Judge, may we approach?
Yes. Submitted.
Sir, let's take a look at Exhibit 550 and the worksheet that's associated with that. If you take a look at it, at the PTSD diagnostic criteria A through F met. Do you see that question there?
Yes.
Do you see the number of symptoms endorsed? It says maximum 17. You see that?
Yes.
And it says 17 there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Let's take a look at the other one that you provided to me on a separate date back on March 18th of 2013, this year, Exhibit 535. Let's take a look at that. This is Jodi Arias. Do you see that same question? Post-traumatic stress disorder diagnostic criteria, A through F met?
Yes,
Question.
I scored that twice.
Sir, numbers are different, aren't they?
Yes, I scored that twice.
You're making all of these changes, aren't you, sir?
No.
Sustained.
Sir, that's a change, isn't it? From one, yes or no?
I rescored it twice.
Yes or no, that's a change, right?
It's a change.
And you only disclosed one of the changes, didn't you?
Objection as to disclosure, Judge. These weren't disclosed to begin with.
Sustained.
Sir, the numbers do not coincide, do they?
That's correct. I scored it twice.
And, sir, you did tell us, though, that with regard to this particular test, there was no need to re-administer this PDS test because, in your opinion, if the new information came out or the changed information came out, well then, to you, she would have exhibited more of the traumatic events or a higher score. Do you remember testifying to that?
I suggested that, yes.
But, sir, if we take a look at exhibit number 550, isn't she already at the maximum 17? How could she possibly go higher than 17?
I don't recall, and I don't know that I have a date on there, but what I did was that I calculated it
Sir,
twice. And I counted.
Judge, he's being non-responsive.
No, Judge, he's trying to answer the question.
Thank you. I had misplaced that particular worksheet. And in preparation for testimony, I decided to rescore it. And I rescored it, and the score may be different by a point or two, but both scores meet the criteria. There's no difference in terms of the outcome of that test based on the score of 17 or 15.
First of all, did you tell us when we were talking about Exhibit 535 that you had misplaced the original? You didn't tell us that, did you?
I don't recall that I did, no.
And with regard to when you testified today, my question is much more direct. Isn't it true that in response to a question from the jury, you were asked, well, if this other story was known at the time that you took this PDS, would the scores be the same? Do you remember being asked about that?
I did. Yes, I
And
was.
do you remember saying in response to that question, well, it's not really something that you were concerned with, and the reason you weren't concerned with it was because you said that she would have scored higher anyway, right? Didn't you say that?
What I was referring to.
Yes or no?
I
sir?
can't answer yes or no, sir.
You don't remember saying that to a response to a juror's question, yes or no? And if you do remember, yes. And if
I
you
don't remember.
Do you have problems with your memory then?
No, sir. No more problems than you do.
Sir,
Overruled. The answer will stand.
Sir, with regard to this issue, have you conducted a diagnostic test on the prosecutor?
No, I have not.
How would you know about his memory problems if he has any?
I'm not saying that you are.
Sustained.
Sir, one of the things that you told us was that you were, when you went to see the defendant, one of the things that happened was that you gave her a book, right?
That is correct.
And you said that you were a compassionate man. Do you remember saying that in response to a juror's
Yes,
question?
I have been accused of that by many.
I'm not asking you if you've been accused of anything. I'm asking you whether or not, in response to a juror's question, you said that you were a compassionate man.
Yes, I did.
And with regard to compassion, isn't that just sympathy for an other individual and whatever situation they may be in?
Perhaps.
Well, no, you're the one that used the word compassion.
Well, I'm not sure that compassion and sympathy mean the same thing.
Well, perhaps if we take a look at a definition from Webster and see whether or not it coincides with yours, all right?
Okay.
Take a look at exhibit number 551. It has a couple of definitions of compassion.
Yes, I see that.
Okay?
Yes.
If I may have it back. Doesn't it say that compassion could be sympathy for the distress of another?
Yes.
And so when you said that you had compassion, you told us that you had sympathy for the defendant, didn't you?
Well, that's Webster's definition. I use the word compassionate.
Right, and we just talked about how Webster defines compassion, right?
Correct.
Objection, Your Honor. This is beyond the scope.
Overruled.
Are you saying that you have a different definition of compassion than Webster's?
I'll go by Webster's definition.
All right, so Webster then talks about sympathy for the distress of another, right?
That's correct.
And so you said that you gave the book to this defendant after your first meeting with her, right?
Correct.
And so that means that, and how long did that first meeting last?
2, 3 hours, 4 hours perhaps.
What was the date?
I can look that up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 12/16/09.
State moves to the admission of exhibit 551.
551 is admitted.
Let's take a look at the definition. You see that?
Absolutely.
It says sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it, right?
Yes.
So what this says is that you now want to alleviate the defendant's distress, right?
My nature is to help people who are in trouble.
And that's therapeutic, isn't it?
No, it is not. It is
Well,
a desire on my part. Therapy is a process. There was no process of therapy conducted.
It's a desire on your part. And that's part of the bias or the thoughts that you take into this evaluation, right?
My training of 35 years has taught me not to inject any bias whatsoever in the impartial evaluations that I conduct.
And that training in 35 years has also taught you to omit certain things from your reports, right?
Like omit what?
Like in finding PTSD. Let's take a look at that. Hold on. Exhibit number 544. That training of 35 years that you're talking about, sir. Didn't that training of 35 years teach you to be accurate?
I absolutely, but I didn't have training as a typist, and I omitted a couple of numbers, which I then corrected prior to coming to court.
And you however, release this report for publication to
I did.
other side, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And you did that even though you had the opportunity to review it, right?
I didn't review the specifics of that section until I started to prepare for trial, when my review revealed to me that I had omitted 2 of the criteria that were otherwise listed in the body of the report.
Nothing precluded you from reviewing that before you made it a final copy, did it?
That's true. I omitted those numbers and letters, and I made an error.
And in 35 years of experience, doesn't that experience teach you to be very careful in going over your reports?
It does, and I was, but I obviously missed those.
And in fact, you know that these are reports that people are going to rely on, right?
Yes.
And you've testified other times with regard to reports, correct?
Absolutely.
And the accuracy of the report is something that you know is sacrosanct, isn't it?
That's right.
But you failed that in this particular case with regard to this report.
I did omit those letters and numbers.
So, it does talk about, in this case, a desire to alleviate someone's distress. A desire to alleviate someone's distress is an indication of sympathy, isn't it?
According to Webster.
How about according to you?
The sympathy for me means more like feeling sorry for someone.
Okay, so you felt sorry for the defendant after the first meeting then?
No, I didn't. I felt a sense of compassion.
A sense of compassion means that you felt sorry for her, isn't it?
Objection as to the answer.
I saw a person who was having a great deal of difficulty. I felt that it would help my evaluation if I sent her this book, and that was the full extent of my interaction with her that in any way could be considered therapeutic.
I'm not asking about the book right now. I'm asking about your feelings towards the defendant. That's what I'm asking about right now. And those feelings that you exhibited for the defendant were such that you felt a desire to alleviate whatever distress she was under.
I did so by getting her a book.
But the answer is you did feel that way, right?
My initial impression was that this was someone who would benefit from that book.
Your initial impression after talking to her was that you felt sorry for her.
Not necessarily sorry for her. I felt that this was a woman who was alone and isolated, and by reading that book, it might help with the accuracy of my report and make her more likely to be able to come to terms with an issue that she was protecting herself from psychologically by creating an alternative reality.
So you feel that your role is that of a support group then, right?
No.
Well, you said she was alone. You just said that. That you
That's
believe
my-
that she was alone and isolated. Did you just not say that?
I did say that.
And if somebody is alone and isolated, you try to take care of that, didn't you?
I offered her, I gave her a book that I felt would make my evaluation more accurate and more complete.
Didn't you just tell me that you felt that she was alone and isolated after the first meeting?
Objection asked and answered.
Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
said, that's what I said.
And because of that, you decided to do something about it, right?
Yes.
And that doesn't have anything to do with anything other than what you're feeling at the time, does it?
No, because I've been trained to disconnect any feelings that I might have from the objectivity of an evaluation. This isn't something that we learn how to do, and I've been doing it long enough to know that sending someone a book that I think might be helpful for them, which in the long run would help me and the accuracy of my evaluation, is not a situation where I'm creating therapy or giving them support, because nothing was ever talked about other than once she told me she was reading the book.
When you were describing an answer to the question from a jury, didn't you use the word of breakthrough, that she had a breakthrough, and then you continued with talking to her? Didn't you say that?
Yes,
Objection mischaracterizes his testimony.
Overruled.
that mischaracterizes what I said. What I said, that if this was therapeutic, if it was a therapy, if it occurred during someone's therapy, it would have been considered a breakthrough.
But just because you say that the word therapy isn't being used, the fact that she changed stories after reading this book because you gave her that book because you felt sorry, that's not considered therapeutic at all, right?
Objection mischaracterizes the evidence of changing stories just after she read the book.
Overruled. You may answer.
It took several visits and many months before she changed her story. And she didn't reveal the new story to me. She referred to it, she told her attorney about it, who then informed me. Whether the book had anything to do with that, I have no idea.
I don't want to know anything about anybody else other than you. Can we just, in other words, what you knew in talking to the defendant? That's what I'm interested in. So after the first meeting, that's when you decide to send her the book, right?
Correct.
After the first meeting, you then had another conversation with her, right?
Yes.
When was that?
When was that?
Yes.
The next.
Approach, please. May continue.
And during that second meeting, you still had those feelings of sympathy, didn't you?
Objection beyond scope.
Overruled.
No, we talked about things that were related to the evaluation, and my feelings were not of concern during this evaluation. I was simply collecting information and data from her.
I know you say that your feelings were of no concern, but if you had these feelings for her when you first started to talk to her, are you now telling us that those feelings changed the second time?
We are trained extensively to deal with our own personal feelings and to disregard them and put them aside in order to conduct an objective evaluation, which is precisely what I did, and I had no further feelings of compassion once I ordered the book for her, because I felt I discharged the duty that I felt I needed to do for this particular person. And that was it.
And that wasn't my question, now was it?
That was my answer to your question.
And my question to you was, did those feelings of sympathy that you had to start this evaluation, isn't it true that they still existed during the second meeting that you had with her?
No.
Objection mischaracterizes the evidence of feelings of sympathy. He's telling him over and over again he did not have feelings of sympathy. He's mischaracterizing it. Overruled. The answer will stand.
And you continued. When was the first meeting? You gave me the first date. It was what?
It was the 16th of December, 2009.
And you continued seeing her, in fact, till there was this last meeting, again, in response to the follow-up, that there was another meeting in December of 2012, correct?
Let me just confirm that.
Well,
Yes.
and so what was the date of the first meeting again?
The first meeting was December 16th, 2010.
So you not consistently, you met with her the first time in December of 2010 till the last time December of 2012, correct?
Correct.
So that's a period of 2 years, right?
Correct.
Sir, one of the things that you did during this course of evaluation that you're talking about is, in response to a question by the jury, was that you administered this PDS test, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that you were asked by the jury was, well, why didn't you do it again? Basically was the question. Do you remember being asked that?
Yes.
And your answer to that was, well, the answers would have been the same, right?
Yes.
And the answers would have been the same because you said it didn't matter what the triggering event was. That's what you said, right?
That's correct. In my opinion, in this case, it didn't matter.
So what you're saying is the event, whether it was her killing or or these two other individuals coming in, that didn't matter, right? The story didn't matter.
For the purposes of my scoring, of using a test which simply confirmed my hypothesis, which was made previously, it didn't matter to me.
And this hypothesis that you had of PTSD, that was formed at the first meeting, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
Well, when was it formed, this hypothesis that you keep telling us about?
Several months into the evaluation.
And you say that exhibit number 540, that her answer, being number 4, non-sexual assault by a stranger, really is not important in this assessment of PTSD, right?
Correct. Based for my use.
Pardon?
For my purposes, it didn't make that much of a difference.
And so she could have said, based on what you're telling us, that 20 people came in and committed this horrific act on Mr. Alexander, and that also would not have changed your opinion of what was going on in terms of scoring this test, right?
You're mischaracterizing what I said.
I'm giving you a hypothetical, sir.
A hypothetical?
Yes.
Okay, if then that's a hypothetical, I would absolutely say that it probably would change the results somehow.
Well, why is it that in this hypothetical that I'm giving you, which is a lie, I made it up, and the other hypothetical or the other circumstance which the defendant gave you and then changed, what is so different about my hypothetical that would indicate to you that there would be a change and not a change to hers?
You indicated in your hypothetical that there were 20 people coming into the house. And the chaos involved in that and the disorganization would be greater than if there were 2 people involved. However, in both of her stories, someone was killed, her life was threatened, and she feared for her life. So those similarities made me feel that the redo of the test was not critical to my hypothesis of post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly because this was only a confirmation of my diagnosis.
And you're saying that in both instances, someone attempted to kill her, right? That's what you said, right?
Yes.
In the first one, when these 2 individuals came in, somebody put a gun to her head, that was an indication that somebody was going to kill her. And the second one, according to you, it was Mr. Alexander who, based on the story that she gave, that threatened to kill her, right?
Yes.
Both of those stories, sir, were told by the same person, right?
Yes.
So one of them has to be untrue, right?
Correct.
And so if one of those is untrue, doesn't that make that person suspect in terms of storytelling with regard to the PDS and anything else that is presented?
No.
So in other words, a person can make up a story and present that story to you, and you know it's not true, right?
Yes.
And based on that, if they then take a test anyway, like this PDS, and they give results on that test, according to you, for example, the answers to 16 to 21 that were asked about, well, I'm going to take these as truthful, 16 to 21, even though the answer to 14 may have been untrue. Right?
Based? I'm sorry, I don't know what your question is.
My question is that you are telling us that the answers to questions 16 to 21, you believe are valid, right?
They were consistent for both scenarios.
No. Okay. I'm not asking if they were consistent with both scenarios. I'm asking whether or not you consider them valid.
The items themselves?
The answers to the items.
Yes, I do.
And the answers were valid to you, even though one of them, we don't know which one of them, or any of them, were based on an untruth, right?
That's right.
Isn't it true that the reason that you take that position is because you have compassion for the defendant?
No.
Isn't it true that you have changed or done things like exhibit number 550? And then exhibit number 535, isn't it true that you've done things like that because you have sympathy or are biased toward the defendant?
Absolutely not.
Isn't it true, sir, that it is an ethical issue for you to have, for example, Exhibit 535 represented as the only raw data, and then have Exhibit number 550 of the same person, same test, scored differently without you telling anybody any? Isn't that an ethical dilemma for you?
I recalculated the items because I had misplaced the sheet. And I wanted to recalculate so that I would have something to refer to, knowing that the first copy was sent in as part of my evaluation. But I didn't have access to it. So I recalculated it again so that I would have something to review when I was going through my reports. However, I might point out to you that either score met the criteria. It did not change the utility of the test.
But you're not answering my question. This does not run afoul of the psychiatric guidelines, what you just did in this case, where you have Exhibit 535, where you scored something, correct?
The original exhibit is the one that I submitted. The second one occurred because I did not have access to that, and I needed to have those numbers in front of me when I was doing my review.
I understand all of those justifications, but my question to you is, in terms of the ethical guidelines, Exhibit number 550 is the one that has the dots that are filled in, right?
Yes.
You filled those dots in, right?
Yes.
It wasn't the defendant that filled those dots in, right?
That's correct.
You're the person who scored this test, right?
Yes.
And you're also the person that scored number 535.
Yes.
Right? And do you remember, originally on cross-examination, that the prosecutor asked you for the raw data? Do you remember that?
Yes.
At that time, you didn't provide any of this raw data with the little circles on it, right?
No, I believe I did.
You think you did?
Objection, Judge. Ms. Fairfax is what happens. May we approach?
You may.
Sir, in front of you, you have the original sheets that you indicate to us were used by Ms. Arias when she filled out the PDS, correct?
Well, I don't know if I have that because my notes have been picked apart and put into exhibit
Well,
file. I don't know that I have those sheets.
Hold on. They're the yellow sheets with green tags in front of you. Do you have that in front of you?
Let's see. Ah, yes.
They have that?
Yes.
Initially, during cross-examination, this is what you provided. Exhibit 534 is what you provided to the prosecutor, correct?
Correct.
At that time, you indicated that you did not know where the scoring sheet was associated with this, correct?
Well, actually, it turns out that it was somewhere else in my book, but that's correct. I said that.
And you came back the next day, correct?
Yes.
And the next day is when you provided exhibit number 535, right?
Yes.
But at no time did you ever provide what's in exhibit 550, which is the scoring sheet with the little round circles on it, right?
Can I see that, please, sir?
Sure, of course.
Well, I have to have given it to you because we have copies here. So, again, if you notice here, This is not an exhibit, but this is a copy that I brought with me. So I don't know where that confusion came
So-
from, but here it is.
So you now have a copy of Exhibit 550 in your file, correct?
Apparently, yes. This is a copy that I have, yes.
And with regard to Exhibit number 550, do you see that 550 has, it's 3-hole punched, right?
Yes.
Take a look at, let me go ahead and mark it what you have there.
Okay.
With regard to Exhibit 550, if you take a look at it, sir, this one does not have any holes punched in it, right?
That's correct, because those copies were made before I punched the holes.
Okay? I want you to look in your notebook to see if you have the one that corresponds to this one with the punched holes.
So, may I ask a question? Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the weekend recess so that you may plan accordingly. I am going to give you what we expect to be the schedule for the next 10 days or so. Next Thursday, this coming Thursday, a week from today, is there anyone who could not be here at 9:30 in the morning? 9:30. All right, we're going to start at 9:30, and we will go till approximately 12:30. Then there will be no court in the afternoon on Thursday, no court on Friday, and no court on Monday, April 1st. We would then return on April 2nd at 10 a.m. So I'm telling you that so you may plan accordingly. With regard to this coming Monday, please be here at 10 a.m. Is there anyone who cannot be here at 10 a.m. on Monday? One additional matter I wanted to follow up. Juror number 15, your hearing mechanism stopped working. Did you miss any testimony because of that, sir?
No, Your Honor. I heard it all.
Thank you. Any questions or other matters from the jury at this time? Let me follow up one more time. Have any of you seen or heard anything about this case in the media? Television, newspaper, radio, the internet? I see no hands. Has anyone attempted to influence you in any way outside this courtroom? I see no hands. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice weekend. You are excused. Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Dr. Samuels, we'll see you back here at 10 o'clock on Monday. Do you have any other exhibits in your folders?
Well, these are my folder, but I'm still missing the exhibits that were just taken from me. So I would like to have that so that I can review them for the.
All right. You can speak with Ms. Wilmot about that.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else, counsel? All right. We are in recess.